Chapter 2. My Early Choices. Hey there, friends. Today, I want to take you back to when I was a kid. Before the seashell stand and before I really knew what entrepreneurship even meant. Back then, I didn't have a business plan, but I had something else. A wild sense of adventure. Let me tell you about it. Growing up in a small coastal town was like living in a treasure chest waiting to be unlocked. I had the ocean on one side and a thick, mysterious forest on the other. Every day felt like a new adventure waiting to happen. My friends and I would spend our weekends combing the beaches for seashells or venturing into the woods to collect pine cones, cool rocks, and anything else that caught our eye. I wasn't thinking about money or success back then. I just loved the thrill of discovering something new, and I bet many of you are the same way. The things we found weren't just ordinary objects to me. They were treasures. That curiosity became the first spark of my entrepreneurial spirit, even though I didn't know it yet. Sometimes we'd find seashells so unique that I'd bring them home and imagine selling them one day. Little did I know that childhood curiosity about collecting shells would lead to something bigger, but more on that later. I remember one summer day in particular. It was the kind of warm, salty day when the ocean breeze tickled your nose and you could hear the seagulls calling in the distance. My friends and I had been exploring the far end of the beach, a place we rarely went because it was a bit of a hike. As we wandered along the shore, I spotted something shiny, half buried in the sand. I rushed over to dig it out, heart pounding with excitement. It was an enormous seashell, unlike any I had ever seen before. Smooth, spiraled, and the perfect shade of lavender. I held it up like a trophy, feeling like a true explorer who had just discovered an ancient artifact. My friends crowded around me just as amazed as I was. And in that moment, I had an idea. What if I could collect more of these unique shells and do something with them? I didn't know it yet, but that thought was the beginning of my seashell stand. It all started with just one shiny shell on a summer day. My excitement for exploration didn't just make me feel adventurous, it planted the seeds for my future business. Looking back, I realized that the curiosity I had as a kid played a huge role in my journey. So, if you love exploring, collecting, or just being curious about the world, keep doing it. You never know where that curiosity will take you. That sense of adventure is the first step to discovering your own path. Now let's talk about dreams. Those big, wild ideas that pop into your head when you're not even trying to think about anything serious. I had plenty of those growing up, and they were just as big as the ocean waves I watched every day. When I was a kid, I loved daydreaming. I'd sit by the beach, watching the waves roll in, and imagine myself sailing far away to distant lands, discovering treasure on some forgotten island. But here's the thing, my dreams didn't stay in my head. I decided to make them real. I remember one afternoon when my friends and I were hanging out after school. We'd been talking about our favorite explorers, people like Marco Polo, who traveled to places no one had ever heard of, or Amelia Earhart, who flew across the ocean like it was nothing. And then it hit me. Why can't we be explorers too? I blurted out. At first, my friends laughed, thinking I was just dreaming again. But I was serious. What if we went out and explored the world around us? We might not sail across oceans, but we had our little town, the beach, and the forest to explore. And in our world, that was just as good as a faraway adventure. So, I gathered everyone together and told them about my idea. Let's create a map of all the cool places we could explore in our town, marking down every interesting thing we found, like hidden shells, strange rocks, or secret paths. My friends thought it was fun, but didn't take it too seriously at first. But I was hooked. I went home that night and drew a giant map on a piece of cardboard I had lying around. That decision, to dream big and act on it, was a turning point. It showed me that big ideas don't have to stay in your head. You can bring them to life, even if they seem small at first. The next day, I brought the map to school and showed it to my friends. They were impressed. It wasn't perfect. Okay, I might have made the beach a little too big and the forest a little too small, but it got them excited. Soon, we were planning weekend adventures where we'd explore the places I had mapped out. Before I knew it, my dream had become our project. Looking back, I realized something important. The decision to dream big is the first step to making anything happen. Whether it's becoming an explorer or starting your own seashell stand, it all begins with letting yourself imagine what's possible. But you can't just stop at dreaming. You have to act on it. That map? It might have just been a piece of cardboard to some people, but to me, it was the start of something bigger. It gave me the confidence to keep pursuing my dreams, no matter how crazy they seemed at first. I didn't know it then, but that was my first lesson in entrepreneurship. Dream big, but don't forget to make a plan. So here's my advice. Never be afraid to dream big, even if your dream seems too wild or too far out of reach. The most important decision you can make is to believe in those dreams. Once you do that, you'll start finding ways to make them real, just like I did with my map. Remember, the world is full of possibilities, and every big journey starts with a single idea. All right, let's talk about something we all deal with: mistakes. Yup, even me. And trust me, I've made plenty. The thing is, mistakes aren't as scary as they seem. In fact, looking back, I realized that my mistakes taught me some of the best lessons. So let me tell you a story about one of my first big slip-ups. Remember that map I made for my friends and me to explore our town? Well, one weekend we decided to venture deep into the woods, following a trail I thought I'd mapped out perfectly. We packed up our backpacks with snacks, water, and flashlights because I insisted we'd find a hidden cave or treasure chest. And off we went. At first, everything was fine. We followed the trail, marked the cool spots we found, and joked around about what we'd do if we really stumbled across pirate treasure. But after a few hours, something strange happened. The path we were on just ended. That's right. My perfect map had led us right to a dead end. I didn't want to admit it at first. Maybe we just need to look a little harder, I said, trying to sound confident. But the truth was, we were lost, and it was my fault. I had misread the trail, and now we were stuck in the middle of the woods with no idea how to get back. I felt terrible. My friends were counting on me, and I had let them down. I could feel their frustration, even though they were trying to stay positive. But instead of giving up, I decided to face the mistake head on. I took a deep breath and admitted, "Guys, I messed up. The map is wrong." It wasn't easy to admit, but once I did, something amazing happened. My friends didn't get mad. In fact, they started brainstorming with me about how we could find our way back. One of them suggested retracing our steps, and another pointed out a landmark we had passed earlier. Together, we figured it out. We made it back safely, and as we walked home, I realized something important. It's okay to make mistakes, as long as you're willing to learn from them. Instead of letting that wrong turn ruin our adventure, we turned it into an opportunity to work together and solve the problem. That day, I learned a few key lessons. Own your mistakes. Don't be afraid to admit when something's gone wrong. It's the first step to fixing it. Learn from what happened. Instead of feeling bad, think about what you could do differently next time. Mistakes aren't failures. They're lessons in disguise. Work with others. When things go off track, don't try to fix everything alone. Sometimes the best solutions come from asking for help. That wrong turn in the woods? It turned out to be one of the best lessons I've ever learned. And let me tell you, it came in handy later when I started my seashell stand. Here's a secret. When I started my stand, things didn't go perfectly at first. I made some big mistakes, like forgetting to price my shells correctly or running out of supplies. But because I'd learned from my mistakes as a kid, I didn't panic. Instead, I figured out what went wrong, made changes, and kept going. The key is to remember that every mistake brings you closer to getting it right. So don't be afraid to try new things, even if you mess up. Each mistake is like a little nudge pushing you in the right direction. So, my friends, the next time you make a mistake, whether it's in school, with friends, or on a project, don't worry. Own it, learn from it, and move forward. Just like I did. By now, you probably know I was always up to something as a kid. Exploring, dreaming, and yes, making plenty of mistakes. But what you might not know is that all of these adventures led me to one big realization. I loved the idea of creating something from nothing, and that's what sparked my entrepreneurial journey. It all started with my love for seashells. Remember how I used to collect them on the beach? Well, one day, while I was sorting through my collection, I had an idea. What if I could sell these? After all, they were beautiful, unique, and some of the shells I found were so rare that even my friends wanted to trade for them. That's when I realized I could turn my collection into something more. A business. But here's the thing. I didn't wake up one day and decide, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. Nope, it didn't happen like that. It started with small steps. At first, I thought about how much fun it would be to set up a little stand on the beach, just like the lemonade stands we used to have in the summer. I figured people strolling by might want to buy some seashells for decoration, gifts, or just because they looked cool. But before I could jump into it, I had to make a choice. I could either keep collecting seashells for fun, or I could take the risk and turn my hobby into something bigger. It wasn't an easy decision because, to be honest, I wasn't sure if it would work. What if no one wanted to buy seashells? What if I couldn't find enough unique ones to sell? These were all questions spinning around in my head. But then I remembered something my grandpa used to say. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And that's when I made up my mind. I was going to give it a shot. I would set up my stand. And even if it didn't work out, at least I would have tried. The first thing I did was plan. I looked at my collection and picked out the best shells, the ones with the coolest shapes and colors. Then I thought about where I would set up my stand. I decided on a spot right near the beach entrance where lots of people walked by. That way, I'd get the most foot traffic. Next, I needed a stand. I didn't have much money to spend, so I got creative. My dad had some old wooden crates in the garage, and with a little paint and some help from my mom, I turned them into a simple but sturdy display for my shells. I even made a little sign that said, Max's Seashell Stand in bright blue letters. Finally, the big day came. I set up my stand, arranged my seashells, and waited. At first, I was nervous. What if no one stopped? What if I had wasted all that time and effort? But then, something amazing happened. A family walking by noticed my stand and came over to take a look. The kids loved the shells, and their parents bought a few as souvenirs. It wasn't a huge sale, but it was enough to light a fire in me. I had made my first sale, and it felt incredible. That's when I knew I was hooked on entrepreneurship. Here's the thing, friends. Starting small is totally okay. In fact, it's the best way to learn. My seashell stand wasn't perfect, but it gave me the experience I needed to figure out how to run a business. I learned how to talk to customers, how to display my products, and most importantly, how to keep going even when things didn't go as planned. So, if you ever have an idea, no matter how small, give it a try. You never know where it might lead. For me, that little seashell stand was the first step on a much bigger journey. And who knows? Maybe your first step is waiting for you right around the corner.